Hi, I'm Kiva Harper.
And I'm Deanne Roper, and we
we
are
are
two
two
clinicians
clinicians
talking. We need a little cup of coffee.
Yes.
And a little microphone and coffee.
And we laugh every time we say
I
that.
know. So our question that we're going to talk about for this video is, if someone is in addiction treatment and they have a history of trauma, do you believe that the trauma has to be dealt with and processed during that early phase of treatment when they're just, stopping using their substances? What's your thought about that? It's kind of big debate in the field, I think.
That is an excellent question. And I'll tell you what I do. Most, if not all, of my clients are abusing some substance.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. In order to cope.
Yeah.
And I don't have a big reaction to it.
Oh, right.
Usually, if it's, I don't have a big reaction to it because
Right.
I feel like if we focus on the trauma and we get them out of distress and help them to have some relief from those symptoms, then other things just sort of fall into place. And then there's usually so much shame attached to coping by using substances that making that the focal point, sometimes I might lose them.
Well, I think in an outpatient setting, like a private therapy kind of outpatient setting, I think you're absolutely right. And a lot of times people are not going to be that forthcoming about their use of substances and that kind of thing. And it's really not a focus.
Right.
But it's there kind of in the background. But it's not really interfering as much with their life, right?
It's not. And we talk about it like, in order to do EMDR, you shouldn't be under the influence of a benzo and so or marijuana. And I'll tell them, okay, so I know, thank you for being so open with me about the substances that you use.
Mm-hmm.
But before we have our session each time, could you ensure that you've not used these substances? You can use them right afterwards.
Right.
But
like the day before or the same day?
Like hours before.
Okay.
Like if we have a morning session, don't use it that morning.
So you can use EMDR with someone who, maybe is smoking marijuana, smoking weed, like up until that day.
I had a client that would, she told me, I have my edibles in the car. So as soon as our session was over, she would go and get those. And I often think that there's something in THC that helps with trauma.
Calm. Feel some calm.
It helps with anxiety.
But having been, in inpatient residential treatment, a long history of that, I also know people who, after, a few months of really not having any substances, they tell me, I feel so much more clear and I was so foggy before. So I'm really curious about how does that work that they're able to process this trauma while they're foggy? What do you think?
Well, I think that...
Of course, it has to be an individual basis, right? It's always an individual basis, right?
But I also think that the client and the clinician have to make a collaborative decision about what they think is causing the greatest problem. And if the substances are enough of an issue that the client feels like that needs to be the focal point, then of course I'm going to support them with that. But sometimes just those trauma reactions, once they put a name to what's going on and they understand their body and how it works, that normalizes things for them and it really makes such a big difference. Yeah. So that's a tough one though, because sometimes, if a person, say it's alcohol that they're using, we know how dangerous that can be. We don't want them to abruptly stop. So the substance makes a big difference. I think
what they're using.
I mostly see abuse of prescription drugs, or benzos, THC, and alcohol. I see a lot of that in my practice. Yeah.
I see a lot of alcohol and weed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But, if you're working in an inpatient setting or residential setting, I do wonder sometimes if we don't push people to sort of process that trauma too soon.
Yeah.
It's someone who's clearly has a full-on substance use disorder. They're in treatment. I think sometimes I kind of was under the impression that with EMDR, you really have to be able to have some really robust coping self-soothing coping skills to be able to process through EMDR. Am I wrong on that, or
No,
how does that work?
But that's part of the process of doing EMDR. You help them to do the resourcing before you even get started with processing trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I was going to say when you were talking about the clients and in an inpatient setting, what that looks like, I think that sometimes they can be treated at the same time. I think sometimes that can happen as well.
Yeah.
Another thing, I strongly believe that your body is not going to go, or your body and your mind is not going to go anywhere that it's not supposed to. So I don't know that I believe that we can push them into processing too soon, because it won't work.
I have always said
ready.
That. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, it's gonna. I mean, we don't have control over that at all.
That is so true. Mm-hmm. That is so true. There was one other thing I was going to say on substance. I'm teaching. This is a little bit off topic, but still SUD. I teach a lot of the different SUD classes, bachelor level, master's level, and it's interesting to learn the history of addiction treatment and how it really has permeated a lot of our thoughts about how we do treatment now. And it's sort of like we learn from people who, been there before, and there's so much new stuff in substance use disorder treatment that I think it's really important that we stay up on the newest treatments, because what we did 10 years ago isn't even always what we want to be doing now. So true. And that because of the history and the nature of SUD treatment and there being the peer recovery process and that kind of thing, I think there's a tendency for us to really hang on to old ways of doing treatment, and that it's really important to stay up on all of that stuff.
And it changes so rapidly.
It really does. The
Sometimes
neuro stuff.
I feel out of touch.
Exactly.
And I'm like, gosh, I need to get more current.
Right. Exactly. For sure. Yeah, that's one of the areas you really have to stay up on.
I really do.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a topic for a future episode, but what are your thoughts about using substances in treatment? That's happening.
Oh, I know, all that new research on, what is it, psychedelics? And,
I have a client that did microdosing, and most relief she's ever gotten from her depression.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good small controlled studies right now that are really helpful. I mean, historically, talk about decolonizing, we have indigenous, tribes and groups and people who have used these kinds of substances from their shaman and healed. Yeah. So there's got to be something to that, right?
Got to.
There has to be.
Got to.
Yeah. I believe it for sure. Yeah. All right, cool.
There are many paths to healing.
Many paths to recovery.
I believe that.
If I could ever teach one concept, I think that might be it. Yeah. Many paths. Absolutely.